Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Weekly Iman Boosters, the Empowered series by ICNA Sisters. My name is Saadia Z Yunus, and I will be talking today about a very special topic. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا زدنا علما. So when we think of Muslim women, okay, for us as Muslim women, we think of positive things, right? We think of Muslim women who are beautiful and who are kind and respectful and loving and all the other words that we can think of when we think of Muslim women. But unfortunately, in society, and so many people have a negative view of Muslim women, and they see Muslim women as oppressed and suppressed. And you know what? We may think of this as well when we think of certain Muslim women who've gone through situations of abuse or they're going through some difficulty. We may not think that they speak up. We may think that they just sit back and kind of take whatever they're going through. So I want us to open our eyes a bit and to see and to understand the truth and the reality of women in Islam and how women in Islam are strong, independent, outspoken, and empowered with high self-esteem, high self-efficacy, a strong sense of self. A Muslim woman is one who knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is her Lord and He is above all, and that nobody is allowed to harm her, nobody is allowed to hurt her, nobody is allowed to abuse her in any way. And so women in Islam, we are empowered. And part of that empowerment is that we speak up against injustice. And not only injustice in society, right? With these rallies and writing articles and calling congressmen and, being a part of the political movement, being a part of the injustice in society that goes on, the mistreatment of all kinds of people, whether it's because of their race or their immigration status or, the family or the country they're from. But it is also in our individual lives. Whether it is and so I'm focusing on abuse, okay? So it can be physical abuse, and not only abuse, it can be harassment, right? It's not necessarily only abuse that somebody you know or somebody in your family is abusing you, but it can be harassment. It can be somebody out, on the street. So the physical, sexual, emotional, all of this abuse and harassment, it's for us to speak out against it. So today I have 3 examples of Muslim women who did just that. The first example is Khawla bin Thaliba, and her story and her empowerment and her strength is discussed in Surah Al-Mujadila. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how He heard this woman and He sent this surah down for her because she was being mistreated by her husband. Her husband treated her with disrespect and disregard. And he basically did this thing called dhihar, which at that time it was a practice of jahiliyyah, where the man would tell his wife that she is like the back of his mother. So she's like his mother. And so when a man declared that to his woman, to his wife, then that would mean that they are divorced. They're automatically divorced because she's like his mother now and she's forbidden to him. So her husband, Khawla bin Thalba, her husband did this and she complained about him. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this surah to eliminate that abuse, right? And that injustice that men were saying this lie and this horrible statement to their wives and abusing their power, abusing their position of authority, and, dismissing their wives with this horrible statement. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them in their place, and it really shows her strength in speaking out against injustice and going to the Prophet ﷺ and complaining about her husband and then getting her answer from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine her strength and her resilience, that she didn't just listen to her husband. She didn't just say, okay, yeah, you're right. But she fought back. And that is what is amazing about her. A second being the daughter of Shu'aib alayhi salam, who became the wife of Musa alayhi salam. So we know the story of her and her sister, how they were working women. They were strong working women, taking care of their father's flock. And that's not an easy thing. And how they still had their sense of hayat, they still had their sense of modesty, that they didn't go and mix with the men at the well. They didn't go and mix with them, but they stood back and they waited. And Musa alayhi salam is the one that helped them. And she saw his strength, that he was strong, he was responsible, he was kind. And so she didn't just sit back, but as a woman, she spoke up to her father about him. And she said, this is a good man. He's strong and he's capable. So why don't you hire him? And she also spoke up to her father about wanting to marry him. And so in these two cases, it might not be easy for women to speak up, or they might just think that, women are supposed to be so shy and timid that they sit back. But she really showed that strength of a woman, of working and, being, mixing with men, or having to kind of mix with men, and still keeping her dignity, still keeping her hayat, that she stood back and she didn't actually go mix with them, but she did her responsibility. She fulfilled her working duties and still kept her deen intact. And the third being the women of Musa alayhi salam, more women of Musa alayhi salam, being his mother and his sister, and how his mother had such courage, such strength and resolve to be able to send her baby off into a basket, into a bin, into the water. And so the beautiful part here, when I was looking through this and studying it, subhanAllah, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is comforting her. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala empathizing and comforting and validating her pain, subhanAllah. And this is the strength and the beauty of and the status of women, that it's not about a woman should have her feelings dismissed, or a woman should just be labeled sensitive or emotional. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala validates her pain and how difficult it was for her to have that fear of her son being killed, and then having that anguish of not having her son with her. And he comforted her not only emotionally, but also by sending her messages, but also physically by sending her baby back to her. And then his sister, Musa alayhi salam's sister, being so strong of character and following the basket and speaking up to, in this family of Fir'aun, right? Just imagine even going to that kind of castle and walking in the door, and how much strength and courage that took, that was a place of injustice. That was a place of tyranny, that he was killing babies and he was destroying families. And imagine that courage that it took to go up to that place and to speak up in these, in this location where all these rich, powerful, tyrannical people were, and to speak up and to say, I know a family that can take care of him, that can take him in, and a woman who will be able to breastfeed him, and he would accept it. And so when we think of these three stories, right, I just basically touched upon them of, despite them, being a part of difficult societies, right, dealing with oppression, dealing with suppression, they didn't allow that to hold them back. First of all, they didn't allow that to take away from their Islam. They still had their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They still had their firm resolve. They had their focus on their deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was first. And then number two, they didn't allow that to bring them down emotionally, physically, psychologically. They remained strong and they spoke up. And so that is the ultimate thing about they use their voices. And so it's so essential for women, for us to use our voices whenever there is injustice being done, whenever there is somebody who's oppressing somebody else, somebody who is putting somebody else down. It is so essential for us to speak up, especially if that's against us. Because those are the times that it may be difficult. We may think, oh, it's not such a big deal, or we give an excuse for the other person, or we think it is really embarrassing to bring up some of the things that have gone against us, right? Maybe somebody's using really harsh words, or somebody's violating us, even physically. So this may be very difficult to speak up. But even in the most difficult of circumstances, it is so essential to speak up. And this is what our Islam teaches us. Through all of the stories, these three stories here today, and so many of the stories that the Empowered series has covered, it really gives us role models to follow. These are beautiful role models, how they kept their deen, they kept their haya in place, their sense of taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they didn't just sit back and say, okay, I need to just have sabr. I need to sit back. I just need to deal with this. He's my husband and he has this power over me. Or this is just the way that the men are in society. Like they push and shove their way through and they get first. Or this is just the laws of the land. This is what I have to follow. So subhanAllah, in all three cases, the injustice, the wrong was being done, and they spoke up. So you and I, my beloved sisters, this is a huge lesson for us, is that no matter what is going on, especially if there's injustice and there's wrong being done, we have to use our voices. Everything that's going on in the world, the things that are going on within our homes, confidence is needed, right? That self-love and that strong sense of self is so necessary. And so we have to realize that if we don't have that confidence, if we don't have that strength to speak up, then that's something to work on and to build, either through reading more about it and learning how to build that self-confidence, attaining classes, going to therapy and working on it, whatever can help us to build, whatever that we need to do to build that confidence, to learn and to grow and to do whatever we can to build that and to strengthen ourselves so that we have the courage to speak up against injustice. We need to do that, my sisters. And so I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us all in strengthening us as Muslim women, in realizing that we are empowered, that we are strong, that we are amazing as Muslim women. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in strengthening that and to strengthen the world around us. آمين. جزاك الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.